next.
Wisconsin lawmakers gearing up for another push to get tough on drunk drivers.
And once again, the package of bills includes an effort to make the first-time offense a crime. Fox 6 investigator Brian Polson shows you why it's not just politics, though, getting in the way.
Yeah, Brett and Ann, for years we've been hearing about Wisconsin lawmakers trying and failing to make drunk driving a crime on the first offense in Wisconsin. Now, State Assemblyman Jim Ott going for a compromise by focusing only on the drunkest of drunk drivers. But some say that approach could have a costly side effect. For all the recent efforts to crack down on drunk driving, Wisconsin remains the only state in America where it's not a crime until you get caught twice.
People compare it to a speeding ticket. Obviously, it's like a really, really bad, expensive speeding ticket.
State Assemblyman Jim Ott is trying to change that.
Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
The Mequon Republican is sponsoring 6 drunk driving bills this session, including one that would make it a crime on the first offense, but only if the driver's blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, is 0.15 or higher. In other words, he's only pushing to make it criminal if the driver is excessively drunk.
You can't say anymore, well, this was just having one extra beer. This is somebody who drank a lot and may have trouble walking, let alone driving a car.
If you would just stand right in front of the machine for me, okay?
On a Saturday night in April, the Fox 6 investigators watched as Milwaukee County Sheriff's deputies arrested 4 drivers for operating while intoxicated. All 4 face civil violations since it's their first offense. Under Ott's bill, 3 of the 4 would be subject to criminal charges.
That will be the most difficult of the 6 bills to get passed.
But it's not just controversial among lawmakers. It's a concern for prosecutors.
I hate to even use the word problematic. It would be worse than that.
Ron Daig is Milwaukee County's most experienced drunk driving prosecutor, and he says the .15 bill could lead to a lot more contested cases, since the average drunk driver arrested in Wisconsin has a BAC of .17.
There's another incentive for defense to attack those cases to try to just shave a little bit off.
Especially if it means the difference between a traffic ticket and a criminal record.
Certainly, with harsh criminal penalties, there will be a lot more incentive to fight cases.
And that's what OWI defense lawyer Andrew Mishlove does best. He is especially critical of the state's blood testing program, arguing that it doesn't require anyone to record the expiration dates of those vacuum-sealed tubes used to capture blood for testing.
And just like the baby food jar on the grocer's shelf, if the seal is bad, the food can be contaminated. If a seal is bad on a blood vial, the blood can be contaminated. If it's contaminated, it can spoil, and spoiled blood can yield a false high test result.
It's an argument his firm made last month in defense of Susan Belmore, who was involved in a traffic crash in Franklin. Her blood registered a staggering .244, more than 3 times the legal limit.
I asked her for a driver's license, at which time she handed me a Target Visa card.
But Belmore is a diabetic, and at the time of the crash, her blood sugar was dangerously low, so paramedics injected her with sugar water. The defense argued that the sugar may have reacted with a certain kind of yeast that could have contaminated the tube, since no one recorded the expiration date.
It requires glucose to grow, and when it grows, it gives off a byproduct, and the byproduct it gives off is ethyl alcohol, the same kind of alcohol that we drink.
It's a strategy Mishlove calls the fermentation defense.
It's a well-known scientific phenomena.
It's a wonderful theory, but unfortunately it's not a theory that's supported by any evidence from any clinical tests or any practical experience done in the labs in this country or in Wisconsin.
Daig challenged the theory, and a jury convicted Belmore. But it's hardly the only theory he has to be prepared for.
Sometimes machines are just wrong.
Mary McMurray is a former chemist for the Wisconsin State Patrol.
I don't want drunks on the road any more than anyone else, but I do feel that a person should be fairly convicted.
She left the patrol in 1994 and has since become a nationally known expert witness for defense lawyers looking to challenge a client's breath test results.
A lot of prosecutors don't like me. I've been called some rather interesting things.
Go, go, keep going, keep going.
McMurray says all sorts of things can affect a test result, from a person's body temperature to use of an asthma inhaler to cell phone interference with the breath testing machine. Daig calls most of that junk science.
Many of the challenges raised by defense experts are based on either a misapplication of the science principles or a misunderstanding of the law.
All those theories aside, McMurray says juries ought to know that breath test results have a margin of error.
I think the jury has a right to know that that number, even though they give you a number, isn't an absolute.
Degg says the machines are accurate to within a margin of .005, and he says even that error is already accounted for in the way a final number is chosen.
The state of Wisconsin, what they do is they give you the lower of the two numbers dropping the third digit. Tight seal and blow.
Take this driver, for instance. She blew a .165 and a .152. The state takes the lower number and drops the last digit, leaving her with a BAC of .15.
Tonight your reported value is .1515, which is almost twice the legal limit.
Whatever the approach, prosecutors like Degg have to be ready for it.
This is the most complicated area of law and science that I've handled in my 22-year career.
And that's why both Degg and Mishlove agree.
If the legislature is going to criminalize first offense, they're also going to have to fund a lot more prosecutors, a lot more public defenders, and a lot more judges.
Jim Ott just wants to send drunk drivers a message.
Produce a deterrence so that maybe some people will think, you know what, the penalties are getting a little bit too ridiculous for me to continue driving impaired, and hopefully it will change some behaviors.
Maybe then, he hopes, more drivers will do what this guy only wishes he had.
Already, Representative Ott is signaling that his effort to get tough on first-time offenders with a high BAC stands little chance of passing. He told me that of the 6 drunk driving bills he is sponsoring, it is the most controversial. He's hoping to get at least 4 of his 6 bills through the Assembly this summer, including one that would make drunk driving a felony on the 3rd offense. Right now, it doesn't become a felony until the 4th offense, and even then, only if all 4 offenses took place within 5 years.
You talked about so many of those defense, theories and arguments. Do they actually work, though, in court?
Not very often, but Andrew Mishlove assures me they do work sometimes. In fact, he says he's used the fermentation defense successfully right here in Wisconsin. The Milwaukee prosecutor you just heard from, Ron Degg, says many of these theories can sound very convincing to a jury. And he says that's why it's so important for prosecutors to be knowledgeable about the scientific principles and theories involved. It's complicated stuff, and Degg worries that more of these contested cases would put a real strain on district attorneys' offices all over the state, especially in some cases in smaller communities.
So much to think about on both sides. Thank you, Brian, for that. Thank you.
Well, you are in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood tonight, number 12 in Milwaukee.